David Waters is going to speak at this time.
Thank you, everybody. Valerie Cunningham couldn't be here today, but I really can think that the Valerie, age 15, who was standing in her uniform, and her memory is here, as Sharon told us, and I'm sure she's with us today in spirit as well. So Jerry asked if I would just say a couple words about the significance of this site. And, we heard today a lot about history making and how the Sinclairs make us think of history and American history in a different way because of what they did and what they did in their communities and what they did here in the North in the era of segregation and the haven that they created here and the wellspring of change and transformation that they created here as well. And just to think about that, we think about the place here, we've heard about Rock Rest as a summer place, really a haven, a place for people to gather. And Sharon, I know Valerie talked about a lot of that conversation around the table was the topics of the day. That's right. And so an education there, and what the struggle was, what the politics were, what was being faced, and what these professionals were meaning to accomplish to change the world. But I think, when we think about the Sinclairs, it's not just that they, opened up the property in 1946 until 1978. They were central in the organization for black rights in Portsmouth before the first branch of the NAACP was established in 1958. And if you want to see the document that they all signed with Clayton's name on it, you can go to the New Hampshire Library as well. But they were also members of the People's Baptist Church. And, we know about Hazel as the cook and the chicken dinners that were provided there. And if you'd like to think of Martin Luther King, that theology student down at BU, and his fiancée-to-be who came up to sing when he guested there, and then we know that they enjoyed the chicken supper afterwards. And you would think that Hazel and Clayton were there as well. So the history makers. But I also want to say a little bit about the memory makers, the importance of the memory makers, because Hazel in particular was a memory maker and a memory keeper. You look at the documentation that came out of here, and one of the things that, Valerie, what a memory maker she is as well. But, when she called me up, and, Valerie, everybody knows, when Valerie called you, I first met her in the early 1980s, late 70s, when she was beginning to do interviews with the elders of the, and a photographic documentation of the elders and getting the stories that she was eventually going to be moving towards first the Teacher's Guide about Black Portsmouth, then the Black Portsmouth Guidebook, and then finally Black Portsmouth, the publication, and that kind of relentless and determined research. When Valerie would say, we've got to do something, you didn't say no, it was like, okay, all right, I understand that, and we know somebody else like that, don't we, Jerry? But she said, we have to do something about Rock Rest. We have to. What are we going to do about all of Hazel's books, her recipe books? But particularly, what are we going to do about all of her photographs? Because I think that Hazel really knew what she was doing with all those photographs. There are thousands of them. And we created the Valerie Cunningham Archive, the Rock Rest Archive, over at the University of New Hampshire Library, and got those secured there. And that means that the memory keepers, the memory makers, that is there. And I think she knew very much. She was not just documenting enjoyable pictures in the garden and people here. I think she knew she was documenting life that needed to be remembered, that needed to be passed on to people like Sharon and to Valerie and other young people in the community, and frankly now to us today. That here it is. Today we are joining them as memory makers. We can go back and be instructed by that history. And I want to say this particularly not just as somebody who's a professor at the University of New Hampshire who taught Black history, but now as a state senator in New Hampshire. We see right now at the attempt to destroy the history of African Americans in this country, and to try to erase what racism has done in our, and to somehow present this kind of fantasy of white supremacy in our schools. But this can be resisted. I think Hazel and Clayton and Valerie knew that the memory makers, the memory keepers, were the site of resistance. They may have taken the drums away, the enslavers, but they could not take the memories away. And I think that that is what here today means. That why is this history in this place so important? It's an old house, back to the late 1700s, right? And the restoration project here, it's not just the house, but the garage, which had the guest rooms upstairs, and everything that was in here. Sharon, you know, and we heard today about the time capsule, that all that was kept there, that all that was there. And it's an irrefutable presence, right? It is now with the marker here, rock, rest, upon this rock, right? But we can't rest, right? We can't rest. So I think because we're here today, we are now the memory makers as well.
Amen.
Right? And that is our responsibility to the future and to the past. Thank you, everybody.
I'd like to open the floor for Mr. Kelvin Edwards to share about Rock Rest.
Hello, everybody.
Hi.
And, thank you for coming out today. And I'm a resident of Kittery for 50 plus years.
Wow.
So I knew Hazel and Clayton for quite a number of those years. And we spent many pleasant evenings and afternoons out here at Rock Rest. So I'd like to tell you a little something about Clay and Hazel as individuals, to sort of flesh them out. You get a glimpse of what their personalities might have been like. You know, when you see the name on the marker, you will know a little more about them other than just the couple who built Rock Rest. Clay, as he was called by many of us, was originally from South Carolina. He came to this area as a handyman and chauffeur for a wealthy white family. In later years, he worked at the shipyard as a general helper and driver for the Navy shipyard. He also worked here at Rock Rest after he got off from work because the grounds and the outside was his domain. The inside was all up for Hazel. Hazel originally came from Baltimore, and she came here by way of New York as a maid for another wealthy white family. There were many other wealthy families who came to this area with their maids and chauffeurs during the summer, creating what I call a maid chauffeur society, so to speak. It was within this group that Clay and Hazel met. They would later get married here in New York and continue to live in the area. Hazel, what most people maybe don't know, aspired to be an actress. So that when she went to New York, she was working as an upstairs maid. She actually took acting lessons from one of the two directors of the movie Cabins in the Sky. I don't know if any of you remember that, but this movie featured Ethel Waters, Lena Horne, and Rochester Anderson. She actually took acting lessons from one of those directors. I don't know which one. Before Clay got married, he had a friend by the name of Alex Moore. He brought him here to this piece of property to look at it because it was for sale. And he told him, you know, the house, you could tear it down if you want to because it's in a very sad state of disrepair. But the property itself is a good investment and it would be worth your while if you bought it. So Clay did do that. And when he brought Hazel out here to look at what was going to be a new home, she promptly told him, I'm not going to live in that shack. So, being the resourceful person that Clay was, he got to working on the house, making repairs, adding rooms, and make it acceptable for Hazel. So 2 years later, they finally moved into the house. Now that Hazel owned a home, her friends from the Maid to Chauffeur Society would contact her, saying they wanted to come for visit. So Hazel didn't refuse them, she let them come for visit. But it happened so often that Hazel told Clay, maybe we ought to start charging you for these visits, you know,
Right.
there's a business opportunity here. So the guest house was built, which is over here to the right, in 1946. And a flourishing business started and kept going. Hazel was a cook, as you heard Sharon say earlier, and she was an excellent cook, very good cook. She would do anything for her guests, but she would not and did not give away her recipes. She said a very inviting table. I'm sure Sharon alluded to that earlier today, in that she used linen tablecloths, fine china, sterling silverware, and crystal stemware. Local ladies like young ladies like Sharon and Valerie came to help. And it's in this guest house over here on the right that I would say that Sharon and Valerie lived when they were here for the summer. Clay's domain, so to speak, was outside. He took care of the grounds and he grew a vegetable garden which provided fresh vegetables for Hazel's kitchen. And hospitality was really one of his strong suits. In the evening with the guests sitting around the line, he would be out chatting them up, so to speak. He'd drive them to the beach, or he'd set up lawn games for them to play and what have you, which is okay with Hazel because, believe it or not, Hazel was a rather shy person. So she didn't mind that Clayton wanted to do all the socializing. She just wanted to keep them out of her kitchen. Both Hazel and Clayton enjoyed travel, and sometimes, often at the end of the season, they would take a Caribbean cruise, or they simply pack the car, get in, and drive cross country or around the country, wherever they took the notion that they wanted to go. They had no children between them, but Clayton had a son, Clayton Jr., from a previous marriage, and he came to live with them when he was about 15, I think. He was just like a sophomore in high school. So he graduated Trape Academy and went off to UMO, which wasn't the best place for Clayton. He absolutely hated it up there. So one day he just walked off and ended up in Chicago. I'm sure that wasn't a good thing for Hazel and Clay that he did that. But he just couldn't abide that atmosphere. And coming from an urban area to here and then ending up in Orono at UMO, it just didn't set that well with him. He did go back to school, however, but not to UMO. This time he ended up at Howard University in Washington, D.C., which is a historical black university. He did very well there. He graduated, went on to get his law degree. He met his wife and married there. And they settled in Atlanta, where his wife, Jean, became a local TV personality. She hosted the Good Morning America, not America, but Good Morning Atlanta TV show. Now, just one other thing I'd like to mention before closing is the snake tail. This is an incident involving me, Hazel, and a snake. But there's a buckhead door just on the other side of that bush, or it used to be anyway.
Still there.
Yeah, and right under that buckhead was a screen that covered the stairs just to keep the debris and stuff out. Well, Hazel opened that buckhead door one day just to air it out, and there was a snake laying under the door on that screen between the screen and the buckhead door. And she called me and asked me if I would come and take care of that snake. But Hazel didn't know that there wasn't anything in the world that I was more afraid of than a snake. And I didn't tell her that. It didn't make any difference whether it was a 6-foot snake, a 6-inch snake, or a snake that was a little bigger than a night crawler. And I was afraid of. But I didn't tell Hazel because I didn't want her to know that. She had enough confidence in me to call me to go take it. So I said, okay, Hazel, I'll be right out there. I couldn't say any other stuff that I thought I might. And I came out. And on the way out, I said, well, maybe if I take a little longer, that snake might leave. He might leave. And I could tell Hazel when I got there, well, Hazel, the snake isn't there anymore. But then I thought, she'll probably want me to go looking for it. So I came out and she showed me where the snake was, and I took a rake and a spade, a flat spade, and I just sort of slid it under the stake and secured it on the top side like that, and walked them out into the woods somewhere. I didn't kill it, I just took it out in the woods and got rid of it. But I never told Hazel about that. She never knew that I was definitely afraid. So I would like to just thank you for your attendance today and listening to me rattle on a little bit. It's been a pleasure, and I think Hazel would not have a problem living in now what has become Rock Rest. Yeah. I don't think she would believe, but she'd be very pleased that this place is now on the National Register of Historic Places, as well as the Maine Register of Historic Places. And thank you very much.
Thank you. Beautiful. Now that you have this recipe. We thank you. And I just wanted to draw attention to someone Mrs. Evelyn knew back there. Raise your hand. She took care of Mrs. Sinclair in her final days. She was one of the people that would take her place and do for her. And so we thank you for that. Hero. Thank you so much, all of you who talked about Rock Rest. Now is the moment that I almost blew the first time. Jerry Ann Rose is going to come forward. And I think she would probably want you to gather around.
Stand out in the street again?
But don't get in the street.
Not too far in the street. Fast and furious down this road.
I know it's been a long day, so my comments will be brief. And there was something the Reverend said that made me think of this. There are a lot of towns in Maine and New Hampshire that's going to be celebrating their 350th anniversary or their 400th anniversary or whatever anniversary. And the anniversary they're celebrating is the arrival of Europeans, right? And I always think of the land that we stand on. how the native people would think about us celebrating those things, because it meant that they were removed from their homeland. And I think about people like Hazel Sinclair and Kel, who just told a story about facing his fear. When we come here, there is a certain amount of things that we worry about, you know? The drivers on the Green Book, when they got in their cars to come to New England, there's a certain amount of fear that we all live with in these kind of spaces that we're unaware of, that we're uncomfortable about, that we don't know. But somehow it doesn't stop us, right? Somehow we keep doing, we keep acting, we keep creating space, making home for ourselves and for others. And I think this is where we are right now in our times. What are we individuals? How do we live in the environment that we're in? What are we doing for ourselves? And what are we doing for others? And what are we doing for our communities? It takes a bit of courage. It takes a lot of courage. The Sinclairs came in the middle of nowhere, if you can imagine what this looked like when they were here. Surrounded by white people who didn't want them here, right? Who didn't want them in their hotels, who didn't want them at their dining tables. We know about the desegregation of the Wentworth. It was a big thing, right? Black folks couldn't eat there. But they did. They faced their fears and with courage created lives for ourselves in hostile environments. So this marker, to me, represents
Watch everybody, there's a car coming. Hear it.
Two cars.
All right, we'll get the license.
So yeah, so this does, the markers, these visible markers of our history reminds us of those stories of courage. Succeeding against all odds, acting, really acting, regardless, not only for self, but for others. So I'm gonna unveil the marker, and another history maker. Again, David spoke about the memory makers, and we're creating history now. History is never dead. It is now. And what is the history that we want our descendants, the next generation, to talk about us? Is what we're doing here, because it's alive.
Do you want to move up? Black Heritage Trail of New Hampshire, Kittery Point, Rock Rest. Hazel and Clayton Sinclair owned this property and turned their home, I'm awful. Turned their home into a summer guest house for black travelers beginning in 1946, called Rock Rest. It was known for its location, safe accommodations, colorful gardens, and fine dining. Like most small black-owned businesses across the country during that era, Rock Rest was promoted only by referrals and word of mouth. The Sinclairs were active in the community. They helped establish New Hampshire's first NAACP branch in 1958 and fought for social justice in housing and public accommodations. In 1975, Rock Rest closed as a guest house. By this time, black travelers had many lodging options and civil rights laws to support them. Thank you.
We certainly want to thank you all. We're moving into our closing words. I'm going to invite Reverend Thompson for some closing words.
God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above. From the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans white with foam. God bless America, my home. America.